In the early morning darkness of February 28, 2026, at precisely 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, something that had been debated in Pentagon war rooms for decades finally happened. The United States, in concert with Israel, launched the largest coordinated air campaign in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The operation was codenamed Operation Epic Fury, and at its center stood an aircraft that was never supposed to fight this war, the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress. An 8-engine heavy bomber designed in the 1950s, first flown in 1952, and yet 74 years later it was raining precision-guided munitions on the Islamic Republic of Iran with near total impunity. This is the story of how American B-52 crews did something truly unprecedented, and what it means for the future of global security. To understand what the B-52 crews accomplished, you have to understand the years of escalating tension that made this moment inevitable. Iran's nuclear program had been accelerating at an alarming pace ever since President Trump's first administration withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018. Tehran never stopped enriching uranium. By early 2025, the head of the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, warned that Iran was on track to amass approximately 250 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enough, in the judgment of multiple Western intelligence services, to produce a nuclear weapon within months if leadership gave the order. Washington responded with a graduated pressure campaign. In February 2025, U.S. Central Command conducted back-to-back Bomber Task Force missions, deploying B-52s out of RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, England, overflying 6 U.S.-aligned regional nations in 48 hours. The message was unmistakable. America could reach Tehran from British soil, but Iran did not blink. Instead, senior Iranian military officials responded with defiant warnings, stating that every base in the region is within range of our missiles, and that those missiles were locked and loaded. Behind the scenes, the intelligence picture was darkening even further. Israel had spent the previous year methodically dismantling Iranian air defenses in what became known as the 12-day war of 2025. Iranian radar networks, surface-to-air missile batteries, and command nodes had been degraded significantly, a critical precondition for what was to come. Meanwhile, by May 2025, satellite imagery confirmed that U.S. B-52 bombers had joined B-2 Spirit stealth bombers already deployed to Diego Garcia, the American military outpost on British territory in the Indian Ocean, over 2,000 miles from Iran. The chess pieces were being moved into position. Nuclear negotiations continued through the summer and fall of 2025, but they went nowhere. Trump's own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, reportedly warned against military action. Trump dismissed her assessment, and Gabbard subsequently reversed her position, stating Iran could have a nuclear weapon within months. The diplomatic window was closing. On June 22, 2025, the United States conducted Operation Midnight Hammer, a stunning B-2 stealth bomber raid on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. 7 B-2s flew 18-hour round trips from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, refueling 3 times in flight, each dropping massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs capable of punching through 60 feet of reinforced concrete. The Fordow facility, buried deep underground in a mountain, was the primary target. The strike was historic, but it was not the end. Iran's ballistic missile infrastructure, its IRGC command networks, its naval forces, these remained largely intact. Tehran's retaliation was coming, and Washington decided to get there first. At 1:15 a.m. Eastern on February 28, 2026, President Trump announced the strikes via an 8-minute video on Truth Social. Congress received only a War Powers notification and a Gang of 8 briefing. What followed was, by any measure, extraordinary. In the first 24 hours alone, American B-2 bombers, stealth fighters, including F-22 Raptors and F-35s, and a vast array of supporting aircraft struck more than 1,000 targets across Iran. The IRGC's force headquarters was destroyed in the opening hours. Over 40 senior leaders of the Iranian regime were killed in the initial salvos, triggering what analysts immediately recognized as a succession crisis within the Iranian government, with competing factions inside the IRGC and the clerical establishment fighting for control. But the opening phase was deliberately calibrated. B-2s, with their radar-absorbing stealth coating and ability to carry the massive ordnance penetrator, handled the hardest targets, the deeply buried facilities, the reinforced command bunkers. B-1B Lancer supersonic bombers struck missile facilities deep inside Iranian territory, their low-altitude attack profiles ideal for threading through terrain. The B-52? It was being held back, deliberately, strategically, for a reason. By the time Operation Epic Fury reached its 72nd hour, U.S. Central Command confirmed what analysts had been anticipating. The B-52 Stratofortress had joined the fight. And when CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper made his announcement, he was precise about what these aircraft had been tasked to do. B-52s struck Iranian ballistic missile sites and command and control posts, and they were being used to hunt Iran's remaining mobile ballistic missile launchers with what Cooper described as nearly total impunity. That phrase, nearly total impunity, is not the language of cautious military bureaucracy. It is an operational statement of extraordinary significance. Here is why. The B-52 is not a stealth aircraft. It is large, loud, and easily detectable by radar. Under normal circumstances, sending a B-52 into defended airspace would be an act bordering on recklessness. But Iran's integrated air defense systems had been shredded, first by Israel during the 12-day war, and then by the opening salvos of Epic Fury itself, which specifically targeted Iranian radar installations and surface-to-air missile networks. With Iranian air defenses suppressed, the B-52 could do what it was always engineered to do: deliver an overwhelming sustained volume of precision munitions against a target set at range. The B-52H variant carries up to 70,000 pounds of ordnance, close to 30 GBU-31 JDAM precision-guided bombs, each weighing roughly 2,000 pounds in a single mission. To put that in perspective, the F-15E Strike Eagle, itself a formidable strike aircraft and one of the most capable fighter bombers in any air force on Earth, can carry between 6 and 9 of those same bombs. A single B-52 sortie delivers the equivalent firepower of 3 to 5 F-15 Strike Eagles. Air power analyst Francis Tusa of The National summed it up plainly. The B-52 is the daddy of bombers as it has amazing payload. This wasn't an exaggeration. It was arithmetic. The crews operating these aircraft flew from two critical basing nodes: RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, England, the U.S. Air Force's key European hub, with a 3.2-kilometer runway long enough for fully laden heavy bombers to take off at maximum weight, and pre-positioned stockpiles of bombs, fuel, and spare parts, and Diego Garcia, the remote atoll in the Indian Ocean from which the B-52s could reach Iranian targets on extended missions supported by aerial refueling. The decision by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to authorize U.S. use of both bases, initially reversed, then reinstated after Iranian Shahed 136 drones struck RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, was, according to defense analysts at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a force multiplier of the first order. ISS analysts Sammy Sampson and Sasha Brookman assessed that the British basing decision effectively quadrupled U.S. bomber strike capacity against Iran. What the B-52 crews were doing over Iran in those first 100 hours was not carpet bombing in the traditional sense. These were dynamic, precision-guided targeting operations. We are what CENTCOM called hunting Iran's last remaining mobile ballistic missile launchers. This is one of the most technically challenging missions in modern warfare. Mobile launchers, trucks carrying ballistic missiles that can be repositioned within hours, are the hardest class of target to destroy. They were a central problem in the Gulf War of 1991, when coalition forces never definitively destroyed a single confirmed mobile Scud launcher despite thousands of sorties. In 2026, the equation had changed. a combination of persistent ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, from satellites, MQ-9 Reaper drones, U-2 spy planes, and electronic intercept aircraft, combined with the AI-assisted targeting systems now integrated into CENTCOM's command architecture, allowed planners to rapidly cue B-52s onto mobile launcher locations before the Iranians could reposition. The EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, operating in support, jammed Iranian communications and suppressed any remaining radar emissions, creating a sanctuary for the B-52s to operate in. The broader target architecture during Operation Epic Fury was comprehensive. CENTCOM confirmed more than 2,000 Iranian targets struck in the first 100 hours of the air war, using over 2,000 munitions, a scale Admiral Cooper himself compared to nearly double the opening of coalition strikes against Iraq in 2003. Targets included IRGC Command and Control Centers, IRGC Aerospace Forces Headquarters, integrated air defense systems, ballistic missile production facilities, missile storage sites, launch platforms, airfields, and military communications infrastructure. On the naval dimension, Iran's surface fleet was devastated. 17 Iranian ships were destroyed, including Iran's only operational submarine and the Iris Shahid Bagheri, a container ship the IRGC had converted into a drone carrier that entered service in February 2025 and was struck within hours of the operation beginning. Iran attempted to retaliate. It launched over 500 ballistic missiles and approximately 2,000 drones against neighboring countries, targeting the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Saudi Arabia in a strategic attempt to widen the conflict and trigger a broader regional war that would disrupt Gulf oil flows and potentially close the Strait of Hormuz. Several commercial vessels were struck in the Gulf of Oman, but Iran's retaliatory capacity was declining rapidly with each passing hour as American strike packages systematically dismantled launch infrastructure faster than Tehran could reconstitute it. The deployment of B-52s from RAF Fairford did not occur in a geopolitical vacuum. It inserted British territory, and by extension NATO's credibility, directly into the conflict calculus. Prime Minister Starmer's authorization, made after Iranian drones struck the British base at RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, represented a fundamental shift in the UK's posture. Britain was no longer a passive observer. It was a basing nation for active combat operations. The reverberations moved rapidly across Europe. Greece dispatched 2 frigates and 4 F-16 fighter jets to Cyprus in response to the Shahed drone strike on Akrotiri. Germany announced measures to protect its military assets and nationals in the Middle East. France's Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group, originally en route to the Baltic Sea for exercises, diverted toward the Mediterranean. NATO was watching and calculating. The alliance itself held together in public statements while fracturing in private deliberations. Some members, particularly those with energy dependencies and trade relationships with Iran, expressed unease. Others, particularly Eastern European states and the Baltic nations, saw in Epic Fury a demonstration of American willingness to use decisive military force against a state-level adversary, and found it reassuring in the context of their own security concerns closer to home. The operation was, as Matthew Koenig, a former Republican defense official, told the New York Times, not just about Iran's nuclear program. It was a statement of American military primacy at a moment when that primacy was being openly questioned. Globally, the economic consequences were immediate and severe. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost over 1,000 points at the opening bell on March 3rd, recovering only partially by the afternoon. Regular gasoline prices in the United States jumped 11 cents overnight. Insurance premiums for commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz spiked to levels not seen since the tanker wars of the 1980s. The global energy market, already under stress, was pricing in a prolonged conflict. The entry of the B-52 into Operation Epic Fury was not merely a tactical decision, it was a strategic signal, one that every adversary of the United States, from Tehran to Moscow to Beijing, was reading carefully. The B-52 Stratofortress has participated in every major American conflict since Vietnam. It rained conventional bombs on North Vietnamese forces. It flew during Desert Storm. It struck Taliban positions from 40,000 feet in Afghanistan. And now it was operating over Iran with, in the words of the CENTCOM commander, near total impunity. The message was this: American air power, when applied with preparation and will, remains without peer. The layered campaign, stealth B-2s for hardened targets, supersonic B-1s for deep strikes, and B-52s for sustained high-volume precision bombardment against suppressed defenses, demonstrated a combined arms air campaign doctrine that no other nation on Earth can currently replicate. More than 50,000 American troops, 200 fighters, 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, 3 bomber types, and a global logistics chain stretching from Missouri to the Cotswolds to the Indian Ocean, and all synchronized, all operating simultaneously. For Iran, the implications were existential in the operational sense. The IRGC's leadership had been decapitated. Its missile production facilities were being leveled. Its navy had been largely sunk at the pier. The drone carrier it had spent years building entered service in February 2025 and was destroyed within months. The nuclear infrastructure targeted in Midnight Hammer had already been struck. Now the conventional deterrent that Iran had spent 2 decades and tens of billions of dollars building, the ballistic missile arsenal that was supposed to hold American bases and Gulf Arab capitals at risk, was being systematically hunted and destroyed from the air. For American pilots and crews flying those B-52 missions, many of them operating aircraft older than their grandparents, aircraft that were designed to deliver nuclear weapons over the Soviet steppe, this was something surreal. These airmen were executing the most consequential strategic bombing campaign in a generation, from bases in England over a country Iran had threatened to reduce to rubble, and doing it with an airplane that was certified for service when Dwight Eisenhower was in the White House. Operation Epic Fury, and the B-52's role within it, represents a watershed moment in 21st century military history. An aircraft born in the Cold War, built to deter Soviet aggression, has now been used to dismantle the military infrastructure of one of the most dangerous state sponsors of terrorism on the planet. The strategic logic was impeccable: suppress defenses, then saturate targets with payload that no fighter aircraft can match in volume. The B-52 did what it was always designed to do. It delivered overwhelming firepower at range, and it did so against an adversary that had spent decades promising it could not be done. The broader lesson is one that strategists in Beijing and Moscow are processing with great care. American power projection from continental bases through British forward staging, sustained by aerial refueling and space-based ISR, remains the defining military fact of the current era. The B-52 is scheduled to remain in service until the 2050s. If the lessons of Epic Fury hold, that decision looks, with the benefit of hindsight, like strategic wisdom of the highest order. History did not end when that first bomb fell on February 28, 2026. But for the crews of those B-52s, banking through the pre-dawn darkness over the Persian plateau with bomb bays full and targets locked, they were doing something genuinely unbelievable, and they were doing it in an aircraft that should have been in a museum. That is the story of American air power in the age of Epic Fury, and it is far from over.